All right. Hey, that was pretty good this time.
Pretty clean, pretty clean. Welcome back to the podcast.
What is up, Relax Reps? Episode 3. We are up and moving, baby. We're
Yeah, we
making
are.
it happen.
After a
And we
busy
got people listening. I
after a
don't know
busy
how.
weekend.
After the busy weekend. Yes. So you're listening to this right now. Davey is now hitched up.
I'm
All those
official.
people out there asking us questions, hitting my DMs like, is Dave single? I don't know. So, Dave's not single anymore. He is hitched up.
I am. What a wonderful weekend.
It was awesome.
Anywho, uh yeah, so a couple of fun topics lined up for today. I was excited and am excited to talk about testing metrics because we have pretty good experience in that, you and I, given our background where we used to work. And then I also want to dive into sports specificity. Is it a myth or does it really exist? So
Lot to get in 30 or 40 minutes. So we'll see if we can kind of tackle that. But
we're here to provide that value. So we're going to jam pack this like sardines in a can. So testing metrics. We talked about this last episode, a couple episodes ago. Um, at the place we used to work at, test days were a staple of what we did. And again, for those listening, you're a bit more in the strength and conditioning sector, myself a little bit more in the personal training side of things. A lot of carryover, a lot of similarities, but I think in the strength and conditioning field, we live by those test days. There's some metrics that we have to bring to the table to measurably improve performance, and whether that's to your athletic director or the head coaches, the more strategic coaches, you want to provide value as a strength and conditioning professional. Your test days are your opportunity to prove that. Meaning, where did we start at the beginning of the season? How well do we maintain that throughout? Some people just test, at the end, beginning and end. That's fine. But I think the more data points you have, the more that data means something. Um, and test days, for those listening that haven't gone through them, can look like a lot of different things. Again, if you're an athlete, you probably know them all too well. If you're not, without getting long winded here, we're on a bit of a rant. In strength and conditioning, we may test strength or speed, we may test muscular endurance or aerobic capacity. On the personal training side of things, I think metrics are just as important, right? Whether a client wants to gain strength, test days are pretty straightforward. But weight loss and checking in on the scale, whether it's a smart scale or whatever, serves to tell the journey of trends for that client. And it can be a real wake up call because in personal training, I don't have to show up, right? I'm paying you, so we're all good, but I may not come. I may take a couple of days off or a week off or whatever. And I think test days serve a great purpose in saying, hey, you were consistent and look at it paying off, or you were not consistent and look, we're still where we
absolutely.
started now 3 months in. That's kind of my rant, my tangent. But tell me, obviously I'm pro test days, but for yourself, where do you stand on them? Let's start with where do you stand on them? How much value do you think they have?
I think test days have a tremendous amount of value. I would also say that for me, the biggest test that you can have is just attendance and keeping track of attendance. So, especially like a personal training setting or a setting that's not a team based setting where like attendance is mandatory. If you are consistent in the times that you're coming, or like you take a couple weeks off or whatever, that's the biggest indicator of the amount of change that you're going to be able to do. Because if you're not showing up, then fuck all else, really. You know what I mean? Like, so I say that's usually the biggest one for me, and then from there, then like testing should kind of meet. The goals of what you want for the team, for the personal training client, for whoever, right? So, yeah, that's kind of how I'll lead that into. Like, I try to make the tests as specific as possible for what we're doing and what we're trying to achieve. Because sometimes you can get cluttered with all of these different tests and metrics that you do. And in my opinion, you waste a lot of time trying to do the test when sometimes a lot of the clients that I've seen, they just need to keep training because you end up spending a lot of time testing. Um, Whether it's setting things up for the test, because the test has to be consistent in itself too, right? It's kind of like, if you're back in like science class, you have to have all of the same things going on
Constant
over and
variables.
over. There you go, the variables, right? So like, you have to have the consistency of that, and then to just have like point blank values of the test and have like actual good data to follow from. So I think that's kind of like the first point of that, and then you spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to make this more efficient and those kind of things. And if it takes too long, if you have an hour session, you might have just burned 20 minutes of an hour session or even more than that. And it's like, okay, they easily could have got a couple sets of things that are going to make like meaningful impact like right now, you know? So I don't know.
No, good points. I would say, again, given our background, we worked a lot with teams. So we could go on for days probably talking about this. I want to hone in first on the strength and conditioning side of things and then spin to personal training after. You brought up a really good point. You want test days to be as least intrusive as possible, meaning if I have a team of like 30 guys and we're testing a 1 rep max on bench press and I have like 2 racks in my gym space, we're going to be there all day working on, ramp up and prep and getting everything set to hit that 1 rep max. It's quite a bit, cumbersome or unpopular, opinion. The beep test in soccer. I mean, it sucks so much out of your athletes. So much. I'm not a big fan of it, as you can probably tell, but it just sucks so much out of your athletes. And it's like, what are we here to measure? What are we trying to really test out? I mean, are you willing to crush your athletes for your test day? So yeah, and every athlete requires different test metrics, right? When you test your 12-year-olds, it's by no means the NFL Combine. So yeah, testing metrics, especially with the strength and conditioning population, I think are so important. And like you said, keep it simple and don't beat your athletes up along the way. Test what's going to impact your programming. Meaning, if you're going to test them on a bench press, they had better have some kind of pressing pattern in their programming. Otherwise, what are we doing? If you're going to have a chin-up test, but there's no pulling in their program, what are we doing? So yeah, I think it has to absolutely translate to the sport, which is obvious. But also it has to not be, super crushing, especially if you're going to carry those test points into the season. That's a tall ask. That's a tall ask. So
Yeah, I'd say a lot of coaches, when it comes to testing, sometimes it is just to see if guys did anything or girls did anything over the summer while you weren't with them.
yeah,
So I've been in situations where they'll do a beep test just because they know that people came in not in the shape that they wanted them to come in. So like whatever that value is to a coach, I can kind of see where that's coming, but it's kind of like a double-edged sword because if you just crush them because they like fucked around and didn't do anything all summer and they come back, then now you're back like another day or two because now they have to really recover from the amount of like extreme stimulus that you just put on them that they haven't done all summer, right? So now you are in a more fatigued state going into your preseason, usually is when this is going on, and preseason sucks too, right? Because you're trying to do a lot of things to get ready for the season, get conditioning in, get all the different skill like aspects and whatever else the drills that you want to get in there. But then you add in this conditioning aspect of like the testing piece that like was really freaking hard, and so yeah, I would say kind of that aspect. I can kind of see where it's coming from, but also, I think when it comes to conditioning testing, it's one of those things where you just need to have a foundation of everything that you're doing all the time. Like I really don't see a huge point in a conditioning test if you see them all year round. Now, if you don't see them all year round, maybe it's only a month that you don't see them or something. Like I don't know. It's one of those things that I go kind of both ways on it, but also I have a lot of different like experiences. Like I've been in the college sector for a little bit longer, and now I'm back in the private sector where it's easy to be in a private sector setting and say, "Oh, like these coaches are just MFing their kids, and they're just doing all this to, because they've been doing it for 20 years." And then there's some kind of backing where I see now as a coach in the college sector, like these administration people and these alumni and the people that are the donors and those kind of things, they're looking to see what changes you've made to better your program. And some of those things, you can get a lot of pressure coming down on you, um, just to have things in place. Like, oh, well, all the kids this summer didn't do any conditioning and then they came back and crushed them, versus the year before that, they actually did come back and they were ready for the season, quote unquote, right? And they did better at the beginning of the season, or they did better overall. So like sometimes they're reaching for things and correlating things, but everyone's just trying to keep a job, and testing just like us. Like this kind of is in some ways a job saver, but what are you gonna do? It's kind of weird. Like you can get hired or fired because your team went 0-10, but you could be the greatest strength coach in the world, right? So what? I don't know. A little tangent there, but
No, I love it. Four things I took out of that. You first talked about a lot of coaches will do it to see what have you been doing in the off season. To your point, if you have test days, you should have some test metric at the end of the season where you see what is their strength outputs, what is their cardio outputs, what are their power outputs. You should have those metrics at the end of the season. When they come back, again, like you said, you do want to make sure that they stayed locked in the off season, 100%. I think you can do that with test days that are not crushing. I think the test days become crushing to those that haven't kept up. They don't need to be dosed up. You don't have to put them through the meat grinder just to see if they stayed on. I think the test day itself should serve as that, right? I mean, if their bench press, 1 rep max or 3 rep max, whatever you're going to do is 185 in the end season, and they come back and it's 195, you can't tell me they've been sitting on a couch. They've got stronger. Maybe they've got faster. Maybe they got more explosive. That tale should be told in the metrics without burying them in bricks. So I agree that there should be some test data to make sure that they've been active. I don't know that it needs to be brutal to do that. You also mentioned external pressure, something you see in the private sector. Again, we're talking strength and conditioning side of it, but you see it in both areas. There are so many layers to it, like you mentioned, right? There's your admins, there's the alumni, everyone that's sending you money wants to make sure that money is going towards something productive. And it's tough. It's tough to be the middleman, right? Middleman meaning your athletes are under you. You're looking over them to take care of them, and you have this boot on top of you to squeeze them for all you can. It's like people don't work that way. I mean, some people, the people that don't want to be there that you see as a coach, you're like, I can tell you who doesn't want to be here and who does, but I don't think it makes sense to just crush everyone. So yeah, external pressures exist, man. And without getting long-winded, in the private sector, they just don't show up, right? Yeah. They pay your bills by showing up, by being a customer, by being a loyal customer. And when they stop showing up, I mean, that is the pressure. And it's even harder, right? Because I mean, they're even harder to reach. If someone's giving you money for you to do your job to coach this team, they'll be in touch. They'll tell you. But a client that doesn't want to work with you anymore, you're like, come back, wait, no. Yeah. So those external pressures exist in both fields. To those listening that may be unaware, and then you also mentioned something interesting in terms of conditioning. Circling back to the beep test and making sure that they're locked in from the off season. But I think we can test conditioning without obliterating someone. A good strength coach can, right? I think old school strength coaches will say, well, this is, like you said, this is what we've done the past 20 years. This is how you measure someone's conditioning. You run them until they throw up. And it's like, are you kidding me? This is a science-based field. And you think that puking in buckets on the sidelines is your test metric for who stayed locked in the offseason or not? Sure. Come on. So yeah, I think what I think is, not trying to throw shade, but I don't want to just bucket all old school coaches, but I think coaches that are misinformed might not know what energy system they're trying to test.
Yeah.
You want to measure aerobic endurance, but you're having them sprint all out, nonstop. Like what energy system are we actually building here? You think that's aerobic? You run them until they're just shutting down? That's not aerobic. That's just punishment. That's just punishment you're dealing. Like, what are we testing?
Well, that's a good thing too. Like you could probably ask a high school coach and be like, "Hey, what's the difference between aerobic and anaerobic?" Just like words like that, and probably 9 out of 10 of them have no idea what you're talking about.
Yep.
And then it's like, okay, so maybe there should be more education on what this like specificity of the sport and the training that needs to be prepared for the sport. Like
You're getting
football's
ahead
going
of
to be a
me.
lot different
You're getting ahead of me. We're diving into sports
so
specificity. Not yet. We
I
haven't
know,
even.
right? Well, I think they kind of blend together a little bit too,
That's
but
why I picked them, Lukey. That's why I wanted to touch
yeah.
on them, man.
So testing gets tricky, especially when you're working with people that don't understand why you're doing them, and then you have to re-explain, and then they still might not understand why you're doing it. Like I had some issues with certain teams I worked with where we would try to run like 10-yard sprints and fly tens like in season, and a lot of some of the coaches, I won't say a lot, some of the coaches had some real issues with that because it was like, why are we testing in the middle of the season? Like this makes no sense, and
Oh
it
no.
was like this whole thing, and I was like getting chewed out a lot and getting yelled at, and there was not a way for us to find a common ground because they had no understanding of that, and they had no understanding that like, yeah, well, no one should ever get if we have athletes on our team that hurt themselves because they ran an extra two 10-yard sprints or two fly 10 yards, which is 20 yards. If you have athletes that can't do that, then, shame on me, whatever. Like, string me out in the middle of the street because, because of the extra 20 yards. But in practice, if we were to put a GPS tracker on them, they're running thousands of yards. So wide receivers or soccer players or whoever are running thousands of yards in a practice, but we can't add 20 yards into an additional practice. So things like that, right? There's an education piece, and the testing I think has to have a level of education to kind of meet that testing because you can test anything you want, but is it going to be something that's like really going to like move the needle and push the team to the next aspect? And some testing for us is more about um, like tracking and management and data tracking and trying to or load tracking, right? However you want to say it. That's kind of like in some ways I did that a lot at Ohio Northern with some of the teams I did jumping every day. So we would get on like a jump mat and have them jump every single day, and they'd write it down. And it's more of like a readiness
I was
test
gonna
than
ask.
anything.
I thought.
Yeah. So we would do some of it in the off season just to make sure that I have some baseline numbers, and then when we got in season, I would have them jump every single day,
To
and
people
then
listening, to people listening,
mhm,
what use is a jump number? Well, one, what's a jump number? Two,
mhm.
when you talk about readiness, what does that mean? So for people listening, what's the point of having them jump?
Yeah. So readiness is something that it's like a term in this field that basically like how are you um, like physically prepared to have your day of practice or have your game or whatever. I would say that's kind of like the readiness and how ready are you
My whoop says I'm fine, bro.
compared to how are you compared to your baseline numbers. Whoop and the bullshit that tracks your sleep, that we could get into a whole rabbit hole there. I
That'll be
could
another
talk,
episode. I know that's a big
man,
it's
we
a
could
big
get into
can to
it.
overturn and dump out. We'll
So
save that for another one. But
just
readiness,
a
you were saying.
whole, yeah. But readiness, yeah. So that's kind of like what I'm looking for is with jumping. Jumping is something that you don't even have to warm up for. So that's why I like doing it every day. You could obviously get a couple warm up sets, but like if you're 18, 19, 21 years old, you should be able to jump whatever. If I saw you in the middle of the street and I stopped my car and I said, "Hey, Jimmy, jump as high as you can right now," you should have zero issues doing that. So that's why it was something that was super easy and something that we can repeat quickly. And it's just like a metric of like, how is your nervous system really firing today? And we would with the consistency stuff, right? We would jump them the same time, same day, every single time, and we would kind of just go from there, and it would be the same protocol every single day. So I didn't have like one guy came in late and he jumped at like in 3 hours after he should have jumped, and then like his numbers are like way different. It's like, hey, what were you doing for the last 3 hours? Oh, I like took a nap or something, right? So like things like that. If you just woke up from a nap or you just um like you had nothing planned all day, I don't know, things like that you have to kind of keep in mind when you're doing that kind of testing. But yeah, that was our readiness testing. That was our jump testing. You could do that 100 different ways. Like some people I've heard of doing like the grip dynamometers or whatever, and like that takes again like You just have the thing, you squeeze it as hard as you can, it gives you a number, you write down the number. And you could do that every single day, and just kind of go from there. So, yeah, there's kind of the readiness, and there's a lot of different ways to test things. We did that. It really works well with men's lacrosse. I love doing it with them, because you could kind of see the trend as like when we started the season, guys were crushed because it was preseason and their practices were really really hard, and they were doing like 2 or 3 days, and then so their jump average numbers dipped significantly towards their baseline. And then as we got like farther through the season, it was interesting to see that a lot of the guys slowly progressed their numbers up and up and up and up. And we got to the end of the season, we got into playoffs, and guys were jumping higher than they jumped in the fall in their from their baselines. And that was like a good sign for me, like awesome, like at least on my end, I wasn't doing anything in the weight room to crush them physically that they wouldn't be able to perform. So that was like the big thing, and we did that too. Like we did strength testing as well. That would be once a month, and I would do chin up testing with them, and it was the same thing, like baseline. If they could meet what they did before, awesome. If they got better than what they did before the season, then I was, and a couple guys did, and we had like a quarter of the team that had better chin up numbers than when they started the season. I was like, this is freaking incredible. Like after such a hard season, like 3.5 months or whatever. But there you go. There's my little rabbit hole of testing readiness and when to test, how to test, I guess.
I love it. I got a couple of notes. So you talked about some of the coaches or people that oversaw you or that you worked with or for didn't like the idea of test days in season because they thought it might be unnecessarily dangerous or intrusive or might leave them feeling beat up. The place we used to work at, there was a lesson, meeting, call it whatever you want. The idea being when you're sitting in a room full of coaches, you talk coach. When you're sitting in a lobby full of parents, you talk parent. And when you're on the floor talking to your youth athletes or college athletes, whatever, you talk athlete. Meaning parents don't care about the stretch shortening cycle. Athletes don't care about the stretch shortening cycle. Coaches care about the stretch shortening cycle and how you're preparing your guys and how we're making the most of it and what are you using a French contrast for them, what kind of crazy stuff are you doing, and then we talk X's and O's there. So I want to challenge you here. I want to push back on you. Yeah. If the people that you're working with or for are apprehensive, do you think there's a possibility that you could have conveyed it better? And you had said it in there. It's not really a test day. It's just we're gathering data throughout the season. Because you and I both know, like you said, if they're already running thousands of yards, as long as they take their time to prep, one more set of sprints should not leave them beat up. You shouldn't be blowing out a hamstring if you're adequately prepped at a young age and pretty, involved in regular activity. Should be pretty safe. Should be. Well, there's another thing I was going to throw in there. I think it does come down to how you phrase it in terms of its data collection. I remember my other point now. What we do in the weight room is planned, prescribed, structured. I mean, it's we know what's going to happen, right? On a squat,
yeah,
you squat down to a box or not to a box, and you come back up. On the field of play, things are unpredictable. They're wild. You have to deal with terrain and opposing forces. It's unpredictable. It's dangerous. So to your point, to say in practice, well, yeah, they can run these thousands of yards, but heaven forbid they run an extra 10 yards or 20 yards on a planned path. Oh no, you and I both know that's horseshit. Horseshit through and through. But maybe something in the way you phrase it, without being condescending and saying, what are you fucking talking about? Maybe a way you phrase it, is, hey, we're doing data collection. They're pretty warmed up. They're pretty ready to go. These numbers are going to serve to better inform me on how ready they are and how ballistic they can be on the field, which is going to help you get more W's. Do you mind if I have them do an extra sprint or two so I can get the data I need to coach them better? Oh, no, I don't want you to. I want you to test them more so I'm better informed. No, I don't want. No coach is going to say no to that, right? Like,
well,
part of it's in the cell. Part of it's in the cell.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah, well, again, it's in how you dress it up. And I'm not saying this is all your fault in any way, shape, or form. I'm just giving you a hard time. But just like you talk to the parents, right? Why is my kid doing a goblet squat? I don't know, maybe because he folds like a candle and the rest of the team is doing Zercher. So I want to give him a safe progression so he doesn't blow his knees out and his back out and he can actually live for a lifetime. You okay with that, Dad? Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Like part of it's in how you phrase it and behind, the why behind what you do. Like we started this so we could talk coach to coach because we get it. We understand. But yeah, other people they don't understand. They don't understand at
Yeah.
all.
And I would say the biggest difference between like private and in college or in a public setting like that is like I don't have the final say, or like we can have a conversation with a coach like that,
Mhm.
and it kind of depends on what kind of coach too. Like
Absolutely. I mean, there's
somebody
some
that's
people, like you said, that will just not listen to the reason. You're like,
just
okay,
old and stubborn, man. Like
yep.
and I hate to put a blanket on it, but like that's what it comes down to, is somebody that's been doing something the same way for a really long time, and you can phrase it however you want to phrase it, and
Show them all the
sometimes
studies.
and then I don't give a fuck. I've been doing this for 30 years. You think I'm gonna? I've won all these championships. I've been a professional. Whatever, right? So like there's things that like I'm sure sports scientists have to navigate through that. And as a like college strength and conditioning coach with no sports science program, like you kind of hold both hats, and you have to like kind of navigate that yourself. And yeah, it was one of those things that some coaches are really about it, and you can kind of meet them in a situation like that, and some coaches just
But
like to
that
screw off
that
same
can
there.
be exciting though, right? When you're in charge of collecting the data and explaining what that data means, that's a lot of power. And I mean, that's a cool feeling to have again if you have the salesmanship to explain the numbers that you have, right? Because I mean, a coach, all right, you shaved a tenth of a second off, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But if you explain how that translates to the game, I mean, you have some really jazzed coaches, some really jazzed parents, some really pumped up teammates. You said
Absolutely.
something else interesting too, in terms of when you were collecting these metrics, watching them trend up. Correct me if I'm misspeaking, but it
No,
was in
no.
season and those numbers were trending up, much to your surprise. Because typically, for those listening, when you go through an athletic season, assuming you care about the sport that you're doing, you're actually trying a lot. Uh, Typically readiness will either sustain or drop off because sport is tough. It's crushing, it's
Yeah.
exhausting. Doesn't matter whether it's a contact sport or not. If you're giving it your all, it takes a toll. And you said that you were quite surprised by that, but I think a good strength and conditioning coach, when they do their job well, is rarely seen. And that's a bit defeating to admit. But if you do your job well, what happens is your athletes stay in the game, they stay injury free, they're able to perform, they're able to do it, all 4 years, or if you're in the professional world, have a lengthy career with you as their strength coach, they're able to fight off injuries and they're able to continue to be fast or strong or stable, call it what you want. But a good strength and conditioning coach is rarely seen. Now, like you're just like in the weight room, it's what they do. It's not like you take someone from benching. I'm going to use professional football. It's not like you take someone that was benching 135 for 10 reps and you move them up to 450 on bench. Like that doesn't. I mean, now in the powerlifting world, that's a whole different sport. It's a whole different thing. But like no NFL strength coach is going to be like, well, look, I tripled his bench. It's like no, it's about did he stay on the field of play through a healthy and long career, injury free. Yeah, you did a great job, coach. And that's a bit of a bummer because I mean, you want to be like, yeah, I did this, I did that, I helped him get to here, but it's like, really, I kept them in the game, feeling
Yeah.
okay, feeling able to do what they love confidently.
I think now the field's kind of progressing to people tracking like the number of injuries you get in sport, the
Mm-hmm.
time that people are injured. So that's like time missed out on, and like you track that over like the season and different things, and that's kind of the next step too. Is that like strength coaches are starting to take that data with them and bring that to administration and say, hey, like, it's not just like these guys are getting stronger or whatever, but it's also like they're staying on the field and they're
Yep.
able to play longer, and they don't have as much time out of the season and time like missing um, game action, and practice and those kind of things. So yeah, I mean that's definitely up there
It's
for sure.
huge. And it is tough to quantify, so I'm glad that people are starting to trend that way. If we've talked long enough about test days for the strength and conditioning population. I wanted to pivot over
Mhm.
to the private training side of things because I believe test days are every bit as important, if not more. In the
Bet
private
more.
sector, I believe so.
Yeah.
In the private sector, test days are your chance to reinforce that your system works as a coach. Meaning, they came in arbitrary number at 200 pounds, they want to get down to 180. Been with you for 3 months, let's say they're at 190. We're halfway there. It's like these 3 months are working, they're paying off. We have to keep course. The client stays motivated, they keep paying you, they get 180, and now it's like, okay, we've done it. What's the new goal? What are we working towards? What is our proof that we're getting closer to something? So I like test days for the private sector because they help motivate the client. Or, and you and I both, had a client, I started and I want to get fit. All right, we're a month in.
Mhm.
They're a little spotty, but they're coming through. They're going. Month two, they say, I'm going to commit. I'm going to dial it in. They're there for a solid month. Month three comes around, they're there maybe twice out of the month. And then month 4, 5, and 6, they're nowhere to be seen. They come back to you and they're like, all right, I think I'm ready to get after you. You say, great, this goal you told me about 6 months ago, how close to that are we? I haven't moved an inch, right? I haven't got a
Yeah.
pound down, an inch lost. I haven't got my average steps is about the same as it ever was. And you're like, well, at least we can explain that. You've done nothing.
Back to the consistency piece, right?
Right. Consistency is huge. And it's eye opening. It's like, all right, so
Yeah.
these are the numbers you gave me. Hold a piece of paper on our first time talking. You said this number mattered to you. Is it still? Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is. What's gonna change? Because we want to get to that goal. So I think test days are every bit as important. Uh, what that looks like, again, clients want to get stronger, especially with Gen Pop, push up test, some kind of single leg squat pattern. Depending upon the person, they might not be ready for that. Might be ambitious. I think chin ups is a good one. These are all pretty minimal equipment. I like some kind of core component, whether it's a low plank or like a straight leg crunch. Um, I think those are solid. I'll be totally transparent in terms of measuring mobility. That's not something I've done in a long, long time.
Yeah.
Since back when I got my cert, they have you do the sit and reach test and you measure how far. I mean, mobility is a really tough one to measure, but it can be done. And
Yeah,
then,
if you're into like the movement screens, like the functional movement screens or
yeah,
whatever, you can dive into it if you want, if that's something that's super important to you.
true. I think for those listening, the functional movement screen, been a while since I tested anyone on that as well. Was it, I think 7 movements? Am I misspeaking, miscounting?
That sounds right. I couldn't even fact check you.
It's either 5 or 7 movements. Again, proof that, there's different tools in the toolbox. This isn't one that we've used in a while, but I think it is a good screening tool to get people in and say, what buckets of movement are they maybe not going to move so well, and what can we challenge and what can we build. So it had its place, it had its time. I don't
Yeah.
dislike it as a tool at all. But mobility, I don't have many test metrics for that one. Cardio, for most people, it's like a mile run for time.
Yeah.
How long did it take you, and did you not suffer all the way through it? I mean, truthfully, I've had people say, I want to get in better cardiovascular shape. And it's like, all right, we'll do a mile. And they stop, after a half a mile and they walk the rest of it, which I'm fine with. I'm fine with because that's where you're at. The goal is not to say pass or fail. It's here we are. There's where we want to go. Consistency will carry us there. Don't be defeated by today. We're testing to see what we'll be at down the road. So, yeah, I think test days don't have to look crazy complicated with Gen Pop. They certainly can. And again, for you in facility, they absolutely can.
Yeah, I would say test days in a private sector scope would be just, I think in a lot of ways what I wrote down was like mobility testing is just movement. Like when you walk in and you have a client you work with for the first time and you see them and they like can't squat, and then you've worked with them for 3 months or something, out of the blue, I think that's one of those things I'm like, wow, like Jill, you can squat full range of motion. You can get your ass all the way down to your heels almost, and you could not do that, you know, 3 months ago. So it's like things like that. I think that's like mobility's movement. And then other ways as well. I think strength training and testing is one of those things that you can take a long time, like developing that. And I would only take like 1 or 2 blocks of the training. If you're working with someone for a whole year, I would spend maybe like a 1, 2, 3 weeks of that entire scope of the year working on like really improving the max amount of strength that you can. So if we're looking at strength testing, like the absolute testing, right? Like I wouldn't have somebody 1 rep max a back squat and then in like a month or 2 months even have them do it again. So because it's you're not going to see a lot of change in that time. And when you're lifting that heavy around like 100%, that's when shit usually goes sideways and like things start to fail, just like structurally or just like the things that you need to work on get heightened more at that point, and it's a lot trickier if you don't have like the right spotters and different things, or you got to put a lot of things into account when you are 1 rep max testing for strength. um, but yeah, I mean, cardio stuff too, you can do all the time, but you're not going to see growth in like 1 week or 2 weeks. You'll see a little bit. Cardio is one of those things that it changes quicker than strength does. So like, and it also stops a lot quicker than strength does. So if you stop running, and you take like 2 or 3 weeks off, there's going to be a significant difference versus if you stop strength training for 2 or 3 weeks and then come back to it. So
Some good points there. Some points I want to circle back to on you. Max testing, Luke is absolutely right. I would not, 95% of the time, I would not do 1 rep max testing with Gen Pop. Just wouldn't even do it. Like, if someone comes to me and says they want to get stronger, my mind will never go to 1 rep max testing. If they come to me and say, I want to do 1 rep max testing, most of the time, at least 50% of the time, I will successfully talk them out of it. Because realistically, to your point, there's too much risk for reward. I would much rather calculate out from a 3 rep max or a 5 rep max what the predicted 1 rep max is. Or again, if it's for Gen Pop, not even for sport, I would do like we talked about before, set a metronome, push-ups, bench, whatever it is. Again, constant weight for your test days. So bench it, let's say 135. You do it to your metronome. We test again, same metronome. You lighten the load. We're going to see a higher rep count. Again, we are moving off of testing max strength, absolutely, but we're still testing strength. That's always where I tend to lean towards when a client wants to get stronger, especially digitally when I'm not seeing them. In person, I would tell people if you want to do 1 rep max testing, if we're in the semi-private sector, do it at the end of the day. We'll do it on a day where you have legs and you can prep on your bench, and I'll work with you one-on-one before everyone heads out. Or we're gonna come in early, get prepped, we'll knock it out on the front end. But yeah, it's just not enough payoff for Gen Pop for me to do that. I'd probably lean to a 3 or a 5 rep max. But you're absolutely right. And to those listening, if you think you're going to 1 rep max a bench every week and see measurable gain, you're eating in your own results. You're not ever going to see results if you're testing that often. So give yourself time to actually grow. Mobility is movement. I like that. I think you're absolutely right. Athletes are tricky because they're master compensators, meaning I could demo something and they will cheat out of X, Y, and Z area to get it done so that they'll do X and Z so that I say, yeah, Y looks good. They're going to try to perform in a way that I can't see that they're missing some things. It sounds tricky to the uninitiated eye, but they're master movers in trying to duplicate that movement and do it well. It's inherent in in sports. So yeah, Gen Pop is kind of the same way, but my follow-up note to that is balance is a dead giveaway. There are some athletes out there that have awesome balance. And when I say balance, I mean like standing on a single leg, like a single leg squat or a single leg deadlift, hinging or squatting unilaterally. If you don't have that as part of your programming, again, you're doing yourself a huge disservice. But people in sports typically do okay with that. Again, painting in broad strokes. You and I have seen many people that look like they are just falling down through quicksand when they hinge single leg. I mean, not everyone moves that well, but again, they hide their compensatory patterns a lot better than Gen Pop. For Gen Pop, that is a place where they need to get comfortable. I can't tell you the amount of people who are like, I don't want to lunge, I don't want a single leg squat, I don't want a single leg hinge, just want to do bilateral. It's like, that's fine. But like, if you want functional strength, take it to one leg. Learn how to move your body weight on one leg. It's so important. Yes, you'll handle heavier loads, and that's ego on your bilateral lifts. Again, painting in broad strokes here, but single leg work is humbling. It'll light you up in ways bilateral doesn't. I don't need to tell you this; you already know all of it. But
I think it's more for me. It's a stabilization piece of it, and like you have to be
that's
doing a
better
lot
said.
more to stabilize on a single leg. So especially for like older clients and things, I think it gets even more important when you reach ages where like falling can occur more. So if you can stabilize better on one leg, then the chances of you falling are probably a lot less, and that's I think the biggest piece is if you can build that strength over time, and then that can build into like when you get older and you still have that those kind of bases of strength, single leg, unilaterally, that kind of stuff. I think that's where it really carries over, and like the functional strength piece comes into play.
Yeah, carries over in function. It carries over in sport. I mean, unilateral training. I, Everything else that has to engage and work to support single leg work is just. I'm a big proponent of it. Again, if we're
Yeah.
talking from safety too, the amount of people that are going to hurt themselves on a skater squat with 3 mats behind them and 2 5-pound dumbbells out in front of them, very few. Very few. Especially with the coach there to make sure they're not falling over. The amount of people that are going
Yeah.
to hurt themselves with 3 wheels on a back squat each side, come on. Come on.
And you can regress both of those things. Like you can regress the skater squat to like having TRX assisted or being in a rack or being hand supported if the coordination, the balance piece is still a problem. And then when that stops being a problem, then you can start adding weight and different things. But yeah, it's definitely something that like you'll see with power athletes. Like if we're talking offensive linemen, if we're talking throwers, even people that like do a lot of bilateral loading, you can see a huge difference in like, okay, like let's see a single leg squat out of you. And like that's the missing link for me when I'm working with those kind of athletes that like pushes them to new heights in their like athletic um prowess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Something like that, right? There's a word,
To
but
be clear to the people listening, I'm not bashing bilateral lifting. I've just seen so many people that tend to lean away from the single leg stuff. And it's like there's so much payoff in that. Of course, there's a time and place, and I have nothing against if you can put 3 wheels on your back and squat ass to grass safely. I tip my hat to
hell
you. I got
yeah.
nothing against any of
It's
that.
awesome.
I mean, the beauty of this field, right? Like you said, if you have a good coach, the idea is that we regress and progress anything that we need to be able to get the desired outcome. That's what a good
Yeah.
coach does. It takes you from strong to stronger, from fast to faster, from resilient to playing through a lifetime. So
Yeah.
that's a solid third episode there. I do want to touch on sports specificity. I think next episode, if you're okay with that, we'll leave them wanting more.
Yeah, hit up our DMs or something. Ask us if you have any if you have any questions for us in our next episodes, and we'll tackle those too if you got any. So let's do it. Three, two, one.
Clean.
You were late that time.
I
You were late
wasn't.
that
Your
time.
computer freezes. Your internet's trash.
All right, see you guys.